All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2026, number 27. And today, we're going to learn something about fighting. Um, Yesterday was not fun. I had massive migraine, wasn't great. Or rather, I had multiple migraines. But while I was laying in bed in agony, I was thinking about ideas for videos and stuff like that. Because you need something to do when light hurts. So, in the murky darkness of my room, I had to think of something to distract myself. And I came with this idea. I don't know. I've probably done similar things like this before, but I'm going to structure it a little bit. I've talked many, many times about the idea that if you really want to be a good GM, and a good player, to be perfectly honest, you need to play more than one TTRPG. Like, just flat out, if you limit yourself to a single TTRPG, even if you absolutely know that system inside, outside, upside, down, you're really doing yourself a disservice because there really isn't a TTRPG on the market that gets everything right. There isn't. Different TTRPGs focus on different things, and by playing them, you will learn why they focus on those different things, how they focus on those different things. And then a lot of times you can take some of that stuff you learned in this different TTRPG back to the one that you really, really love, the one that you want to be exclusive with. And it's going to make you a better player, but more importantly, it's going to make you a better GM. Specifically because players, like, you can get ideas from other TTRPGs, but your GM is the one that has to decide whether or not they're going to allow them or not. So, this is not to say that none of this information is useful for players. In fact, what we're going to be talking about today is the fighter, and aspects of the draw steel flavor of the fighter that I think can kind of apply to any TTRPG and will make the fighter better. But we're specifically going to be focusing on the 2024 version of the fighter in D&D 5th edition, because I think that particular flavor of fighter just isn't really great. And to be blunt, I don't think the fighter in D&D 5th edition just in general is that great an example of the fighter. Yeah, let's talk about this. So, for anyone who doesn't know, draw steel is D&D 4.75 in the same way or in a similar way that Pathfinder is D&D 3.75. The big difference being there's significantly more differences between draw steel and 4th edition than there are between Pathfinder 1st edition and D&D 3.5. Like, it's almost the same game for Pathfinder. Draw Steel, however, does add in quite a few other things that effectively makes it incompatible with 4th edition as it is. But it does a lot of things really, 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 really well. And I think one of the things that it does better than I think any other TTRPG on the market right now is something I talk about in class design is the idea of defining features. It was a term that was taught to me by a buddy of mine that actually playtests for Wizards of the Coast. Like, before we get to see the Unearthed Arcana stuff, my buddy has already played it and playtested it with his group. He's one of their playtesters. And so I had him look over my Dragon Knight class. And one of the things that he told me is like, well, what are your defining features? And I'm like, He's like, class design for 5th edition is basically, what is it? A defining feature is something that makes the class unique, that makes the class play like no other class. And in order for it to be considered a defining features, it has to show up within the first 2 levels. And when you look at 5.0 D&D classes, it's very, very easy to point out, oh, these are the defining features of that class, because they will be expanded upon and improved as the class levels up. When you get out of D&D 5th edition, the idea of defining features doesn't just go away. TTRPGs that are well designed have defining features built into their classes. In Draw Steel, the defining features of the classes, not only do they all show up at level 1, but you also choose your subclass right at level 1. And in general, your subclass is going to modify some of those defining features immediately. So as much as, yes, there's only, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's only 9 classes in the base version of Draw Steel. However, each one of those 9 classes has 3 subclasses, I believe. And while they all share defining features with the rest of the subclasses in that class, they all play pretty differently, and it's impressive. So that's the reason that I'm starting with Draw Steel specifically. And this is not going to be exclusively, hey, let's look at classes and how you can fix them. The next video I want to do about this is actually about combat design, and we're going to be talking about the TTRPG Lancer. So, but the reason that I'm focusing on the fighter is fighters are so easy to get wrong. And I think D&D has gotten them wrong more often than they've gotten them right. And what I mean by that is, when you look at the fighter, like, you go all the way back to the Genesis, the fighting man is what it was originally called. D&D was a significantly more simplistic game at that point. It was a fantasy combat simulator for the most part. Yes, there was role-playing and stuff that you could do with it, but the vast majority of the rules were combat rules. The first version of D&D required you to own the rules to a combat game called Chainmail. So the original flavor of the fighter was literally, there was 3 different characters. You had fighting man, magic user, and I think it was cleric or priest. I can't remember which one they called it. And that was basically, okay, do you use weapons? Do you use magic? Or are you a healer? That was the choice that you made. And because of that, all 3 of them played very, very differently, because there really was no overlap. I mean, yeah, clerics could use weapons, and technically so could mages, but they really weren't made for that. And with how combat went, if you were a magic user that was bopping people with your stick, you were wasting your turn a lot of times. And so at that instance, they really didn't need to do much to make the fighter feel special. The fighter could use all this really cool armor that made them very difficult to hit. They could use every single weapon that existed. It made them feel very interesting. Fast forward 50 years, and now we're looking at the fighter, and it still works, don't get me wrong, but not a whole lot has changed as far as, define what a fighter is. It's basically going to be right at level 1. It's like, well, they can attack, and they can use any weapon. Okay, well, what do the different weapons do? Well, we have the weapon masteries things, but as I've talked about before, the majority of weapon masteries are mostly pointless. They don't actually change how you play the character in any way, shape, or form. They're just little extra things that half the time are kind of useless. Some of them are actually useful, like the push weapon mastery can be useful if you want a kind of control style character. But things like the slow weapon mastery, not going to do a damn thing. It really, really isn't. If you're using a melee weapon with slow, that enemy's not going to be running away from you. It's just not, that's not how it works. Now, maybe after you see the next video it might, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So when we look at the Tactician, which is the Draw Steel version of the fighter, and we look at the initial abilities that they get at level 1, we start to see a significantly different idea of what a fighter is, and what that means compared to everyone else in the battlefield. Right now, using a fighter can be a little bit boring, even if you choose one of the more interesting subclasses like the Battlemaster. Battlemaster fighter by far is one of my favorite versions of a fighter, because it's the 5th edition version of the 4th edition class, the Warlord. And the Warlord is my favorite flavor of fighter that has ever existed. It's a control-based character, and the entire it's a control-based leader. And in 4th edition, that means it's a healer. So it is a strength-based healer, and the entire point of the Warlord is they kind of sit back in combat and give out attacks to other people and then heal as necessary. They can go toe-to-toe with enemies as well, but it's this amazingly awesome control-based class. So the Battlemaster fighter is very, very cool. But you only get 4 superiority dice at level 1. You don't get an additional one until you get to level 7. And anything that you do as a Battlemaster fighter requires you burning one of those dice. So, yeah, it is kind of cool, but that means that generally after 2 combats, you have nothing. And the one thing that makes you cool, and a lot of these things are, bait and switch. When you're within 5 feet of a creature on your turn, you could expend 1 superiority dice and switch places with that creature, provided you spend at least 5 feet of movement and the creature is willing and doesn't have the incapacitated condition. This movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. And then roll the die till the start of your next turn. You or the other creature, your choice, get a bonus to AC equal to number roll. So that particular thing, you move, you switch places with a character, and either you get a bonus to AC or they do. So you're slightly harder to hit until next turn, and you get to move. You get to switch places and so on. It's a very useful ability. But when you weigh it with the fact that, well, I only get to do that 4 times between short rests, and there's a chance that we may not get a short rest for like 3 or 4 combats minimum, because it takes an hour to do that. It doesn't feel quite as special. And that, in my humble opinion, is the coolest version of the fighter. And the thing that I think makes them cool is kind of the idea of a fighter, a weapon master, whatever you want to call them, is when you have all of these other characters around you that can do these supernatural things. You have a guy over here that is conjuring fire out of nowhere and throwing it at people. You have a guy over here that not only can move faster than you can see, but can punch through steel plate and still do damage. You got a dude over here that transforms into a bear and mauls people. And you, the fighter, have a sword. Getting strong Hawkeye vibes here. Yeah. So, the idea of a fighter existing in this world of these supernatural characters is they are supernatural in a sense as well. And that supernatural ability, as far as like most games are concerned, is they're not just good with weapons. They can do things with weapons that shouldn't be possible. They can wield a sword in reverse grip and actually do useful things. They can dual wield and fight multiple foes. If you're wondering why I'm saying all these things, these are all things that, historical weapons experts claim are completely impossible to ever be useful in any situation ever. And I hate those people with that kind of content. Those people are probably really nice people. But I hate that kind of content with a passion, because most of it is very, very uninformed. Like dual wielding, we have so much documentation of dual wielding being a thing all over the world. everything from the Florentine style of fencing, where you used 2 rapiers, to paired broadswords in various versions of Chinese kung fu, to samurai iado techniques and bushido, where they would wield both their katana and wakizashi simultaneously, or the tanto and the wakizashi simultaneously. Dual wielding was a thing, and it was used in duels. It was used on battlefields. It's a real thing. We've got tons and tons of proof of it. However, the min-maxers that are historical weapons experts want to just poo-poo on everything that you find cool. So, now that I'm done with that rant, the thing that's going to make your fighter feel like they're a cool, interesting, awesome character is you need to let them be a cool, interesting, awesome character. When we look at things that inspired the fighter, technically Aragorn was a ranger, but they share a lot in common with fighters. And there is this really, really awesome anecdote from the set of Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. In it, slight spoiler alert, there's a fight near the end of that movie where all of these Uruk-hai are coming in, and the Fellowship effectively gets separated into a bunch of different groups. Well, part of that fight is like the leader of the Uruk-hai goes like one-on-one with Aragorn. And the fight scene in and of itself is phenomenally well choreographed. It's amazing. Like, they're doing all these cool things. The orc dude throws his shield, and the shield, the way it looks, if you've ever seen the Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Infinity War, I think, the first one, not the second one. So I think that one's Infinity War. Anyway, you know those shields that Captain America gets where he's like, and he's got like 2 kind of like pointy shields on each arm? That's effectively what this guy is using. That's actually a real shield too, where it's kind of long. But instead of having a point here, it actually has 2 points with a space in between. And so what this guy does is he hurls it forward and it goes chunk, and it actually traps Aragorn against a tree. And the Uruk-hai comes up with his sword. He goes, and he brings the sword along the shield, trying to behead him. And so Aragorn is like, shunk, and then ducks under it. And the sword embeds itself in the tree. And then he kind of kicks him off, and Aragorn's holding his sword. And what was supposed to happen is the Uruk-hai... and Aragorn, as he gets under him, Aragorn pulls his dagger out, stabs him in the leg, and then rolls away to get into a better fighting position. And what was supposed to happen was the Uruk-hai pulls the dagger out and throws it at him and misses. And this is the key point. He throws the dagger at Aragorn and misses. However, he's in the middle of a shoot. Lots of crazy shit is going on. He's in this. All the Uruk-hai were all in practical makeup. So they're wearing rubber masks and all this like incredibly, hours and hours and hours of makeup and wigs and armor and all this stuff. So there's just chaos going everywhere. So he throws the dagger and he doesn't miss. It's going right between Aragorn's eyes. Now, these are still stage props. I believe most of them didn't have edges on them because it just wouldn't be safe. And there's really no good reason to have a sharp sword when you're doing this stuff. It's just going to get people. So I believe either they didn't have edges put on them at all, or they were very, very, they were as dull as they could make them. So the likelihood of this being like a killing blow or something like that, very, very low. However, it's still like, these are still metal. They were actually forged like real knives. So even without an edge, you have probably about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 pounds heavy chunk of metal coming at you that's going to hit you at a very small point. It's not going to turn out well. Viggo Mortensen, who plays Aragorn, without missing a beat, brings his sword up and deflects the knife. That shouldn't be possible. Like they've done studies and stuff like that. You want to know one of the most difficult things in any sport ever? It's hitting a fastball. And the reason why is the time it takes for a fastball to go from the pitcher's hand to the glove is technically just barely over what human reaction time is. Because a lot of these, especially if you're like a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, which is technically a slow fastball now, because we have people that are throwing fastballs now at the upper 90s. I think people have thrown over 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. And so the thing with baseball, if you've ever played baseball, there's a bunch of different pitches that they can throw, and the entire purpose of this, and they can actually aim them in a bunch of different places too. The entire purpose of this is the pitcher is trying to trick the batter into either swinging in the wrong spot or swinging at something that they simply can't hit. And so a lot of these different pitches will have movement built into them. If you've ever heard of a curveball, the reason it's called a curveball is because it literally curves. Like you can watch it coming at you and do this. Like it's really, really fascinating. It's entirely physics. The physics behind it is really, really fascinating. So when you're at the batter's box, not only do you have to know when the pitch is going to get there, and depending on the pitch, like curveballs are slower than fastballs, obviously. So you have to get your timing differently. There's a pitch called a changeup, which is an exceptionally slow pitch that goes so slow that it throws your timing off. So as a batter is just sitting there, not only do they have to figure out where this pitch is going to be, and anywhere between the strike zone for most people is anywhere between your armpits and your knees, and it goes out to about what is it? I want to say it's like 3-ish feet, 2.5, something like that, in front of your body. So there's this kind of cube of area. Anywhere inside there, you are required to hit it, or it's a strike. So as a batter, you have to sit there trying to figure out where this ball that's coming in less than a second, you have to figure out where it's going to be. You also have to figure out, is it going to be in a place that you can hit it? And you have to figure out how fast it's going. As it's coming at you, and gauging speed on an object coming directly at you is exceptionally difficult. So all of these calculations have to go through really, really quickly, and it makes it literally the most difficult thing to do in all of sports. So there is a difference between a ball, which is specifically designed to be noticeable amongst the green field. It's a white ball with red stitching on it, and it's different than everything else in front of you, aside from maybe your opponent's uniform. It sticks out. A knife has a significantly smaller cross-section. And so the idea of Aragorn or Viggo Mortensen, in this particular instance, being able to deflect that away is insane. Is it physically impossible? No, he literally did it. But statistically, it's really, really unlikely that happened. And again, that wasn't what was supposed to happen. However, if you watch the movie, you will see him deflect that. They only did it once. They never tried to get a second shot of that, and they went, no, that's going in the movie. It doesn't matter if anything else went wrong in that scene. We are using that take because we're never getting that take again. We could not have choreographed that in a million years. That is what your fighters should feel like. They should be able to do things that you can't really do in real life because everybody else can. I really, really get annoyed with people that put this huge emphasis on the idea of, well, you know, that's not how a sword works, or that's not how a whip works, or it's absolutely fantastic. However, we're dealing with a world where people can conjure things out of nothing. They can transform into animals. They can mend wounds with faith. Can we just allow the fighters to do something miraculous? Do we have to limit this? Like, no one else in this game has to be limited to what is real. But the people that are using weapons, nope, weapons got a big wheel. So, let's actually talk about the things that the the tactician can do. There's 3 different flavors of tactician: the insurgent, the mastermind, the vanguard. Insurgent does naughty bits. I'll read it here. Doing your duty, playing fair, and dying honorably in battle is your opponent's job. You'll do whatever it takes to keep your allies alive. That is a very cool version of a fighter. This is a person that their entire kind of motivation is, I'm going to make sure that this gets done. The mastermind. You have an encyclopedic knowledge of warfare, viewing the battlefield as a game board and seeking victory by thinking steps ahead of your opponent. That's the warlord. And you'll see, like, the stuff that they get to do is very warlord-esque. And then the vanguard. You have learned the stratagems of ancient heroes, letting you lead from the front lines and seek victory through sheer force of will and personality. We will talk about the vanguard in a second here, but they're fucking awesome. So, 3 different flavors of fighter, but the main kind of focus of the fighter, and I think the thing that we can really take from any other flavor or any other TTRPG is what's called field arenzel. So, need another drink. One of the things that Draw Steel does better than anybody else on the market right now is weapons are not damage dice. What I mean by that, if you play really any flavor of D&D, even when we go back to 4th edition where they did do a lot of interesting stuff, your weapon is a damage die. That's all it's useful for. Some magic weapons will give you some other cool stuff that you can do with it, but a lot of those magical effects you can literally put on any weapon. All the weapon is a damage die. And 5th edition was the epitome of this. There are 3 different one-handed light weapons. You have light hammers, you have scimitars, and you have short swords. All of them do a d6 of damage, I believe. Yeah, all of them do a d6 of damage. The only difference, hammers do blunt, scimitars do slashing, short swords do piercing. Despite the fact that the short sword, which might more accurately be referred to as like an arming sword, if we want to get into the historical weapon expert stuff, short swords are not exclusively thrusting weapons. They are not something like a poignard where the only thing you really sharpen is the tip. Short swords were massive. They were by far probably one of the most used weapons in medieval combat because they were remarkably simple to make compared to some of the more advanced weapons that you could make. And they were remarkably simple to use. They had a point. They were relatively short, like they were only about that long. So they were relatively short, meaning you didn't need quite as much training to be able to use them. And they could slash, they could thrust, they could chop through things. Like they were an incredibly versatile weapon. However, that's not the point of D&D 5th edition. It's just a damage type. Now, eventually, with, I think it was Xanathar's or Tasha's, I can't remember which, they added some feats that, depending on the damage type, you could do different things. And that started making your damage type slightly more useful. But for the most part, I mean, the same thing was true about the long weapons. The longer one-handed weapons, you had the Warhammer, you had the longsword, and you had the rapier. You want to know what the difference between them was? Longswords did slashing damage, rapiers did piercing damage, Warhammers did bludgeoning damage. That's it. Nothing changes. Now, when we look at Draw Steel, you don't technically have weapon classes, you have what are called kits. Kits takes your weapon and armor and kind of puts them together into a kind of fighting style. The kits that exist, I want to see if I can't get a count really quick. Of course they don't have them listed in an easy way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So there's 21 different kits. And to give you an example, one of the kits called Cloak and Dagger. And this kit is based on the idea where you wear light armor, like leathers or things like that, and you wield 1 or 2 light weapons. And because that's how you use your weapons, it changes how you play. You get a stamina bonus, hit points, for anything else. You get a speed bonus. You get to move more than other characters. You get both melee and range damage bonuses. So you do more damage because you've specifically been taught how to use these weapons to cause damage. You get a ranged distance bonus. Anything that you do that has a range to it, you can add 5 squares to it. Then you also get a disengage bonus where you can move around a little bit. So the entire idea behind the Cloak and Dagger kit is you are a very mobile character that is very good at getting in and stabbing people. So, well, what weapons do you use? We use light weapons, which are basically weapons that you can dual wield. Well, what specific weapons do you use? What weapons do you want to use? It's the whole point. And it comes with a signature ability, a thing that they can do. For the Cloak and Dagger, it's called Fade. When you hit with it, you do damage, and you can shift afterwards. So you hit, you move, and it's a melee or a ranged attack. So if you want to be a shooty Cloak and Dagger kind of person, and what I mean by that is instead of shooty, maybe like throwy. You can be. You throw, and then you get the fuck out of the way. All is one action. That's what Cloak and Dagger is, and that's how Drawsteel treats all of their weapons. It really doesn't matter the specific weapon you're using. It matters how you're using it. And what that means is every one of these kits is going to change the way that you play your character. Not just, oh, it gives me a different attack. It literally changes things about your stats. And any class that can use kits can actually switch their kit on during a respite, their version of a long rest. So if you no longer are enjoying being a Cloak and Dagger user, you can switch to the Battle Mind, where you wear light armor and wield a medium weapon. Medium weapons are things like long swords, stuff like that, where they can be one or two-handed. And it changes a lot of things. You get a stability bonus. Basically, if someone tries to move you, they have to try extra hard to do that. And a higher melee damage bonus. And then their signature ability is when they hit somebody, their stability bonus goes down. Like, they actually are easier to move because you hit them in such a way that they're not able to kind of hold their own ground. So it completely changes how you play the character. So going back to the tactician, their defining feature that all tacticians get, doesn't matter your subclass, is called Field Arenzel. Our Arsenal, not Arenzel, Arsenal. I don't know where I got Arenzel from. I need more water for this. Stay. See? Agua. So, Field Arsenal. Basically, again, the way that kits work for everybody else, not the tactician, everybody else is if you can use a kit, if you're a weapon-based class, then you get to choose one of the kits. And I don't think any of the classes actually define which kits you can use, like you have in D&D, where it's like, well, if you're a druid, then you can only use natural weapons and scimitars for some odd reason. Nobody has been able to figure this one out yet, but they like curvy blades. Who knows? If you can use a kit, you can use any kit. And that means you can do everything. Like some of the kits, they have both the pugilist and the martial artist, which are me punch you in the face kits. Or you could have the whirlwind kit, where you get to use a whip and it's super cool. So everybody else, you get the kit, and it gives you a single signature ability, and you can do other cool stuff. Great, that's fine. Field Arsenal allows you to use 2 kits simultaneously. And it means that you can actually combine the passive abilities that they give you. So what that means practically, the tactician gets to effectively be hyper customizable. Now, if we look at how the fighter has been kind of designed since 3rd edition, when they introduced feats, one of the defining features of the fighter in D&D is they get extra feats, which allows you to customize them a little bit. But you are limited to what customization feats will allow you to take. And so if there isn't a feat that's going to give you that ability, you're going to be a little bit more limited. And if we're looking at like the 3rd and 3.5 version of feats, the feats themselves are very small piecemeal bonuses. Like, oh, you get an extra +1 to attacks with this, or your crit range for this one is increased by 1. They're very, very small. So the fact that the fighter gets more of them is kind of cool, but it doesn't really change anything. With the draw steel flavor of the fighter, being able to combine 2 different kits changes things massively. Like, to give you an example, you could choose the sniper kit and the shining armor kit. And so what that means is you get the bonuses of both of them, which I don't believe any of them overlap. So you just get a shit ton of bonuses, but you also have 2 different attacks. The shining armor kit, which is heavy armor, you wield a shield and a medium weapon. So longsword, warhammer, whatever you want to use, you're your classic sword and board character. So their signature ability is called Protective Attack, where you do damage and then you also taunt the target, which makes them kind of focus on you. The sniper wields no armor, wears no armor, and wields a bow. And their signature ability is Patient Shot. And if you don't take a move action this turn, this strike deals extra damage. So, this is one where it can shoot from really far away. It can be up to 15 squares away, which multiply that by 5. It's 75 feet away that you can do this. Or you could come in and shining armor this nonsense. So with that, you have a character that has things like a disengage bonus, a ranged distance bonus, but then also has a stamina bonus, a stability bonus, and melee damage bonuses. So this is a character that can really thrive in any situation. And in the middle of combat, there are no rules in Draw Steel about switching to a different weapon. Again, because everything is designed around these kits, which is a fighting style rather than a specific weapon, there aren't any rules necessarily for, in order to draw a weapon, you can draw a weapon as part of an attack action, but only one, unless you have a feat that allows you to draw 2 at the same time or stow 2 at the same time. That stuff doesn't exist in Draw Steel. So effectively, this knight that did shining armor and sniper can sit there, take down an enemy this turn, realize that the other guy that they need to take care of is way too far away for them to get there, and so they can just immediately stick their sword in the enemy they just killed, take the bow off their back, shoot them, and then as someone starts coming towards them, the next turn just take their sword out and beat them again. Like, again, if you want to go the historical weapon expert, that doesn't make a ton of sense, being able to just instantly switch weapons and things like that. But that's the thing that makes the tactician, the fighter, so cool. That's the reason that the fighter is going out on the battlefield with all of these supernatural characters, and they don't feel like they're completely useless. When you look at, like, Hawkeye is a really great example of a mundane hero that doesn't feel mundane. Nothing about Hawkeye is supernatural. They are, I mean, you can argue that they have a supernatural ability to hit targets and, understand angles and things like that. But, you know, when you compare them to the dude that has literally a magic suit that just generates anything that he wants in any given time and lets him fly and shoot laser beams and missiles and bombs and all this other stuff. And then on the other side, you have this dude that turns into a massive, you know, rage monster. You know, the ability to shoot things with a bow and arrow is kind of okay. And the reason that Hawkeye is able to hold his own with these people with supernatural abilities, exceptional abilities, is he can do things that he shouldn't technically be able to do. Like there's a scene in the first Avengers movie where he's sitting there and he's just calling out stuff. He's like, hey, you over there, and there's people coming over here, which is a very Battlemaster fighter style thing to do. But then there's also a thing where he's talking with someone and he just does this and goes, Phew, and he shoots someone that he's not even looking at. Theoretically, some people might go, oh, well, that's physically impossible. Well, technically, yes. Being able to shoot someone when you don't know where they are, that is impossible. But some people have kind of pointed out he's on the top of a building surrounded by mirrors, effectively. Like all of these buildings, because light is shining on them, all of these buildings have tinted windows. So they're all effectively mirrors. So he can be looking here, but he has a building right here that's showing him what's behind him here. He has a building over here that's showing him what's behind him here. And he has just learned the muscle memory where if I want to shoot something that's there, I just shoot like that. And that's what makes him a really cool fighter style character. He's doing things he theoretically shouldn't be able to do, but it's just so badass and cool. Or the idea of like Legolas getting into melee combat with orcs, and he's sitting there going, an orc gets too close, so he draws an arrow and just goes ching, ching. Arrows don't really work that way. Like especially the broadhead arrows that he was using. The entire purpose behind that arrowhead, the ones that go like this and are like triangles, the reason that they're shaped that way is the point makes it go into the body easily. And then it gets wider, it creates a wide wound. And then once it's in there, the body will kind of close itself around that, trying to protect itself, meaning trying to take it out is very, very difficult, especially if they're barbed in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of the point of broadhead arrows is that taking them out will generally do as much, if not more damage than putting them back in. And a lot of times, you kind of lose the head of your arrow. So the idea of Legolas being able to go clunk, clunk, and then still be able to shoot it straight after it has been covered in viscera and all this other stuff, that shouldn't be possible. But he is this super awesome fighter style character. He's a ranged fighter. But he has all these cool things that he can do. So he should be able to do something really miraculous. And the idea of a fighter being able to instantly change what weapon they're using, or even just change their fighting style on a whim, so that they can instantly react to a situation, that makes them supernatural. That turns them into something interesting. As opposed to, well, I go up and I hit them with my sword, and then I do it again 2 times in 6 seconds, and that makes me super powerful. So, the idea of the tactician having this field arsenal is really, to me, it is the best version of a fighter. Now, in order for something like this to work in any other game, you do need to have weapons that are more than just stat blocks. There has to be a reason for them to change weapons. Whether you're using exclusively like magic weapons, where each one has like a different effect when it hits, that would be something interesting. You could go, I'm going to say the Phantasy Star RPG route, where every single weapon not only has a special thing, but fighters also have an additional weapon mastery feature kind of thing that means that they can use those weapons in ways that other people can't. That turns a fighter style character, a weapon master, whatever you want to call them, into something really interesting. And I don't think it's something that's particularly difficult to add to other tabletop RPGs. Like I said, the one thing that you need is something that allows the fighter to do things with weapons that other classes can't, and the ability to kind of just switch or change up what they're doing at an instant. So it can be as simple as introducing some sort of fighting style aspect to the game. Again, kits are effectively that. If you look at Pathfinder 2nd Edition, their monk has stances. I don't think they're the greatest version of stances that have ever existed, but they're an example. If you look at Daggerheart, I think it's called the Brawler now. The Brawler, the martial artist subclass of the Brawler, gets a bunch of different stances. All of those things are things that can turn a fighter into something that seems really, really interesting. Or simply allowing the fighter to do things like, here's something that a lot of people are not aware was a completely legitimate way to use a sword in the Middle Ages in combat. It's called half something. It's like half holding or something like that. Basically what you do, if you're familiar with how a sword works, you have the hilt down here. That's where you put your hands. And then you normally will have a guard right above that. And then you have the blade. What a lot of people don't realize, most blades are only sharpened on the top part. Because if you're cutting someone or if you're attempting to cut something with the blade right next to the guard, you're really not going to get enough force to do anything. So 9 times out of 10, the area next to the guard isn't sharp, depending on how long the blade is. So half-handing, I think that's what it's called. Half-handing, what you do is you turn the sword over, you grab the blade, and you hit them with the guard. And the reason that you do this is, especially if you have something like a cruciform guard, where it's literally just kind of like a piece of flat metal, you can use it as a blunt object to hit and make impacts. You can also use it to hook your opponent's armor and kind of get it in and try and like rip them to the ground. You can get in things that you can't do with the sword. Kind of turns into a combination like precision striking weapon and a grappling weapon. But won't they cut their hands? Not really. In medieval combat, most of the time you're wearing gauntlets or something like that to give you hand protection. And as long as you're not moving your hand a lot, just touching a sharp weapon is not going to cut you. There needs to either be pressure on it to force it into your hand, which you might do if you grab it in the wrong way, or you have to move on it, and that will cause a cut to happen. But if you know where it's sharp and where it's not, that's why it's called half-handing. You don't hold it at the end. You hold it about halfway, and then you hit them with it. Just allowing your fighters to be able to take their longsword and half-hand it to turn it into a blunt weapon, or allow them to grapple with it. Grappling rules already exist in D&D 5th edition. Even 5.5, they already have grappling rules in there. So allowing your fighter to just instantly start half-handing their sword, or if they're using a whip, allowing them to grapple someone at a distance with it. I understand whips can't quote-unquote really do that. I really don't give a flying fuck. Again, the guy 10 feet away from me is conjuring fire, and the guy like 10 feet away from him is calling down holy light from the sky. I am going to use my whip to wrap people up. So using rules that already exist in the game to allow them to use their weapons in ways that aren't built into the game. If you want to lean into the weapon masteries, you can. I just think that they're poorly written. Look at the Phantasy Star RPG if you want to see weapon masteries done right, because I think they do them very, very well. But things like allowing different weapons to inflict different conditions, or the things like that. and then allowing the fighter to just have like 3 or 4 or 5 different weapons on him and then just instantly switch depending on the situation. That is going to make the fighter feel incredibly powerful. It's going to make them feel incredibly tactical, even without dealing with any other abilities that are built into their class. Just the fact that, oh, I can use a longsword to trip somebody. Or I can use a warhammer to I'm trying to think, like warhammers kind of have a singular purpose, which is they crush things. I can use a warhammer to create difficult terrain, or spiky terrain. Yeah, that could be really, really fun. You can use your warhammer either to hit somebody, or you can hit the ground and make it, hurt if people go across it. That would be something that was very, very cool and interesting, and something that no one else can do. Again, get creative. Look at the rules that already exist. Look at rules that you don't use a lot, and see what you can do with them. A good example, in Daggerheart, the whip. A whip is a secondary weapon, and the ability that you can use when you have a whip is effectively you crack it and you scare people and you move them back. So the whip is literally used to move people, which is an interesting thing, and it moves people by scaring the shit out of them. Where there's a lot of other things you can do, like for anyone who doesn't know what a whip is actually designed to do. Whips are noisemakers. They're not actually designed to make content or contact. They aren't designed to make content either, but they aren't technically designed to make contact. They have been used that way many times. And there's a certain kind of like subclass of whip that you don't actually crack it like you do with kind of a traditional whip. What you do is you hit someone with it, like a cat of nine tails, or the whips that they used during American slavery and stuff like that. If you think that they're sitting there going, whoosh, whoosh, they're not doing that. What they're doing is, because it's flexible, conservation of momentum basically makes it so that as the kinetic energy moves down the whip and it gets thinner and thinner, it amplifies the energy. And the reason that whips crack is when it gets to the end, there's so much energy there that the tip of the whip actually breaks the sound barrier. And that's what the whip crack is. It's a sonic boom. The cat of nine tails and stuff like that use a similar property, but what they do is that when it hits somebody, it stops the kinetic energy and transfers it to the end, and so that the end of these things hit with a tremendous amount of force and generally will break skin and things like that. That's why things like cat of nine tails a lot of times will have like tips or something at the end, so at the very end they have something that does significant amount of damage. It's all about amplifying kinetic energy and things like that. So anyway, other than that kind of subclass of whips, the real purpose of a whip is a noisemaker. Like bullwhips are not designed to hit bulls. What they're designed to do is they make a very, very loud noise from a very, very specific place. People that are very, very skilled at using whips can crack them at a very, very particular place. And when an animal hears an exceptionally loud noise from here, they go this way. And that's what whips are really designed to do, is you don't use them to hit the creature. You use them to direct them by making a very, very loud noise, or a maybe not even like a super loud noise, but a very quick, unexpected noise from a very specific place. And when they're trained correctly, they know, oh, when I hear that noise, I go the other direction. So the idea of having the special ability of the whip to kind of scare people, that's actually how it's designed to be used in the vast majority of the things. But what are other things that can happen if someone causes a small sonic boom near vulnerable pieces of your body? You get a whip crack right next to your ear, you can be deafened. Also, fun fact, rupture your ear drum. It can also really screw up your inner ear, which is where balance comes from. So the idea of using a whip to make someone unsteady on their feet is a real thing. Like one of the things, if you were not really interested in fighting honorably, one of the things that you could do to your opponent, if you were bare knuckle boxing, is you'd cup your hands and slam them on their ears. And what it would do is it would rupture their eardrums, deafening them, but it also screw up their equilibrium because our balance is controlled entirely by this water or this liquid that's in our inner ear. And so when those eardrums burst, it screws everything up there. And it literally to them feels like the ground is doing this. So having them be able to use a whip to disorient an enemy or having a whip crack right in front of your eye will probably cause significant amounts of damage. So using it to blind a creature, either temporarily or permanently, that's 100% a thing that a whip could do if you were skilled enough with it. Now, in real life, is that kind of stuff going to be happening? Probably not. Like, there's too much randomness that you could never control. But in a fantasy game where, again, the dude over there is calling down holy light from the sky to incinerate people, I think we can suspend our disbelief enough to say that the dude that's really good with weapons is able to whip somebody's eyes away or whip their ears in a way that disorients them or deafens them or a million other things. And I think that's what we can really take away from Draw Steel for any tabletop RPG. We're talking about a fighter style character. They can't just be, well, they can use any weapons. That's boring because guess what? Everybody else can use quote unquote any weapon. When you put all the other classes right next to each other, somewhere in there, there's going to be someone that can use every weapon that a fighter can use. So nothing about the fighter, unless you want to make specific weapons that are exclusive to the fighter that no one else is allowed to use, having them be able to use all the different weapons and all the different armor really doesn't mean much, and it can make them feel very boring. But if they get to use weapons in a way that nobody else can, they get to instantly switch weapons that gives them a significant benefit to a lot of different situations. That is very interesting, is very cool. It's a little bit unbelievable. But so is turning into a bear. So let's stop trying to force the fighters to live in the world of reality while everyone else is in the world of fantasy. Interested to hear from you. By the way, there's a shit ton of other stuff that the tactician in Draw Steel does that maybe another day I'll talk about, like their marking system that I really, really love. And we can have an entire video talk about that. But I really think the field arsenal is something that you theoretically can apply to any tabletop RPG. And every single tabletop RPG has a fighter class. Every one of them does. And a lot of times they kind of get overlooked. So simply doing something like field arsenal. I don't know why I have such a hard time reading that word. Field arsenal will make your fighters feel like superheroes, like literally everybody else at the table. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, what are your opinions on fighters in general? Do you like the idea of, well, I like the fact that the fighters are kind of the simple class, that all they do is go forward and they attack. Because sometimes I don't want to be doing crazy, weird stuff. Or are you like me? It's like, well, yeah, you can play the character that way, but I'd much prefer the option of being able to play a weapon master style character, someone that actually masters weapons and can do cool ass shit with them. Like that would be very, very cool and interesting. Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if there is another TTRPG that you think does fighters really, really well, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is going to be all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.